Yeah. No. Yeah. There's a lot of people. Is this almost, if Justin comes, will that be everyone? Johnny's not. Okay. We're going to start the meeting. Welcome to the November 17th, 2022 meeting of the City of Des Moines Plan and Zoning Commission. I will first read the rules and procedures. The Plan and Zoning Commission is generally an advisory body to the City Council. The City Council will hold a public hearing and make the final decision on all matters before the Commission, other than site plans and subdivision plats, unless denials or conditional approvals thereof are appealed. Please contact the City Clerk or Development Services Department staff for details on council hearings. Applicant will be given 10 minutes to present the request. Proponents and then opponents from the public are then allowed to speak in that order, with each speaker allowed a maximum of 5 minutes. Applicant is then allowed 5 minutes for a rebuttal. The hearing will then be closed and the commission will discuss and vote on the issue. All comments are to be germane to the item under consideration and speakers are to maintain a courteous manner. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda will not be individually discussed and will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report unless an individual present or member of the commission requests that the item be removed from consent and considered separately under the public hearing agenda. Okay, and can I have a motion to approve the November 3rd, 2022 minutes?
This is Carolyn, I'll move.
Thank you, Carolyn. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. I will read through the consent agenda items. Item number 1 is continued from November 3rd, 2022 meeting. It is a request from the Oaks on Fleur, represented by Adam Siernan, for review and approval of a preliminary plat, Oaks on Fleur preliminary plat on 0.94 acres of property at 3020 Fleur Drive for development of 15 one-household residential lots. Is there anyone on the commission who wishes to hear this item? Anyone in the public? Number 1 will remain on consent. Number 2 is a request from 13th and Mulberry, represented by Josh Aberson, for review and approval of a public hearing site plan, The Deco, for property at 1301 Mulberry, and for type 2 design alternative in accordance with City Code 135 to allow a portion of building to be 1 story in height when buildings are required to be 3 stories in height per City Code. Is there anyone on the commission that wishes to hear this item? Anyone in the public? Number 2 will remain on consent. Number 3, request from Jean M. Schmidt, represented by Janet L. Friel, for review and approval of a minor preliminary plat, Schmidt's Acres, for property at 1150 Northeast 52nd Avenue in Saylor Township, and within the 2-mile distance for extraterritorial review of subdivision plats by the City of Des Moines to allow subdivision of the existing property to create 1 new residential lot and 1 outlot. Is there anyone on the commission who wishes to hear this item? Anyone in the public? Number 3 will remain on consent. Item number 4 is on public hearing, but there is a request to move it to December 3rd. It's a request from Eastgate Plaza LLC, represented by Norman S. Weinstein, for review and approval of 8th Amendment to the Eastgate Plaza PUD conceptual plan on property at 1514 East Euclid Ave to allow car wash use. They have requested to have it continued to December 1st. Do I have a motion to continue that item?
This is Dory, also move.
Thank you, Dory. All in favor, please raise your right hand. So item number 4 will get moved to December 1st.
If I could, I believe there was somebody in the audience on item
Oh.
3 that did we have somebody here that wanted to hear item 3? You're opposed to the request? Yes, I would like to hear the Okay.
Oh, okay. So item 3 will be removed from consent. So the consent items are number 1 and number 2. Do I have a motion to, no, we moved it. So number 1 and number 2, do I have a motion to move consent?
This is Carolyn, I'll move it.
Thanks, Carolyn. All in favor, please raise your right hand. All right, thank you. And we will start the public hearing with item number 3, which I already read, and Nick Tarpey will be presenting for the city.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Nick Tarpey, planning staff. So what we're going to be talking about here tonight is a land subdivision. So just to reiterate what Emily had said earlier, so this land subdivision is in Polk County, so it's not within the city of Des Moines jurisdiction, but per Iowa code, whenever there is a land subdivision that triggers a preliminary plat process within the county jurisdiction, if it's within 2 miles of our city limits, we conduct a courtesy review. So that's why we're looking at that tonight. It's basically in Iowa code that we have to do that. So just also want to reiterate too, we'll talk about this briefly tonight, but also this plat will get reviewed separately. It is getting separately reviewed by Polk County. They have their own public hearing process for that. Any future development on the land, so if they end up building anything, it'll go through Polk County planning and zoning, so all the building code, zoning code, stormwater management, all those things. So just wanted to preface that with what we're about to talk about tonight. So just to reiterate, this is about a 7-acre parcel here that is getting subdivided, or basically lot lines rearranged to create one buildable lot and then one outlot, which would not allow development. So here's the vicinity of the property right here, highlighted in orange. This is Northeast 52nd Avenue. We're about a half-mile north of 8035, you can picture it, and we're probably about a quarter mile to the west of Northeast 14th Street. So you can kind of see this residual commercial corridor here, a lot of commercial uses. The surrounding area, single-family homes, deep lots, relatively rural in character. So here's the plat document here. I'll just walk you through it real quick. So here, this hatched area here, this would be an egress easement, so that's how they would use vehicles to access the site. This area here, and that's shaded a little bit lighter, it's almost 3 acres. That would be the buildable lot, so that's where they would propose to eventually construct a new dwelling, single-family dwelling. This outlot Z here, that's in the darker shade, this would be that woodland reserve area that I was referring to, so it's an outlot, they couldn't build any structures on it, and they would have to preserve this as forest land. Also want to note here, this area that I'm highlighting with my cursor, it's a surface water flowage easement, so eventually when stormwater management would be required per Polk County with construction, that would be the easement that they would use for stormwater management. So generally, because of all that, staff is generally supportive. We support the request. We recommend approval of it, subject to any administrative comments. We've worked a little bit with the county on this, making sure that everything that's proposed complies with their requirements related to utilities, site development, land subdivision, et cetera. So with that, I'll take any questions. Also just wanted to mention, I did get a couple phone calls and then an email this week too from somebody, so I'll let this linger here if people want to read it. Just kind of curious about what's proposed.
Can I
Not
ask one,
against it, just curious.
Just curious. Yep, exactly.
can I ask one question on procedure? Is there anything, like if we don't like it, is there anything we can even do?
Jason, do you know?
Gary, do you want to speak to that? I mean, I think ultimately the county can still approve this.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. This is, because it's not within our jurisdiction, and ultimately it's going to be Polk County's call. You can certainly share your views on it for your vote, but it's not binding.
I think another thing just to raise too, as part of our staff recommendation, we waived our right to read this at city council. So this would be the body that would hear it. You would have some sort of recommendation or a ruling, and then that would get forwarded to Polk County.
All right. Thanks, Nick. And is the applicant present then? Okay. You can come up, state your name, address, and then you have 10 minutes and sign in when you're finished.
Hi, my name is Jeff Willie, so I'm representing my mother-in-law, Janet Friel, which is in the listing there. Basically, this land is family land of my wife's family that they actually lived in, I think, 4 of the different houses there with different grandparents and things like that that have since passed or moved away. Since the last surviving aunt passed away, we kind of inherited all those 3 different lots that exist today, and our plan would be to connect those together and then divide them again so that we actually have access to get back to a house lot. So basically trying to keep all that woodland as preserved as possible, and then just simply building a single house there. I don't have much else to add, but I can answer any questions you have.
And you will have an opportunity after people from the public speak for rebuttal. So if
Okay.
the public has any questions, you will be able to answer.
Okay, sounds good. So sign here.
Thank you. Yep, and just sign in. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of this item? Anyone against the item? Are you against the item? One of you?
Or if you just have questions or anything, you don't have to be for or against, but
Yeah, if you're
want
new-
an opportunity to speak.
I can't hear what she's saying. Okay. Okay. Okay, so does anyone on the commission have anything to say? Otherwise, I'll just close the public hearing. Okay, the public hearing is closed. Do I have a motion?
This is Dory. I'll move staff recommendation.
Thanks, Dory. All in favor of moving staff, please raise your right hand. All right,
Motion carries.
thank you. All right, item number 5 is a request from 2701 Ingersoll LLC, represented by Todd Milling, for review and approval of a public hearing, site plan Star Lofts for property at 2701 Ingersoll for type 2 design alternatives A through C, and Nick will also be presenting this item.
Okay. Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the commission, Nick Tarpey, planning staff. All right, so the crux of the relief tonight is generally more about some of the architectural elements. If you read your staff report, read the agenda, so in terms of building siding, things like that, there's really not a lot to talk about. So a couple of the items I really, and I think as staff in general collectively, we want to hear from the commission. We want to have a dialogue between staff, the applicants, and then also the commission. So hopefully everybody's ready to engage a little bit, so it should be a fun discussion. So the property in question, this is 2701 Ingersoll. Right now, it is the Star gas station. That's been the use for a long time. It's pretty recognizable, I think, on the corridor. People are relatively familiar with it. This parcel is a little over a half acre, right on the corridor in between 24th and 28th Streets, in the heart of that Ingersoll commercial corridor. Here's a street view of the property, what it looks like today. People have been down there. A lot of the streetscape improvements have been recently completed. As part of this project, they would be maintaining a lot of that. So here's just a general view of the site. Won't spend too much time on it. You can see it's a 3-story building. It's pushed up pretty close to the lot line. We have 1 vehicular access, parking in the back, maintaining that streetscape like I mentioned, cycle track, Class A sidewalk, tree beds, those sorts of things. So that's all proposed with this project. Just a couple other views in case we need to go back to it in terms of utilities, landscaping, things like that. So here's some of the floor plans. You can see it's a pretty square building. Just generally, first floor is proposed to be a flex, multi-use retail space, commercial space. Tenants, users are unknown at this time. They're still trying to figure out some of the programming. Second and third floors would be all residential. So we're talking 10 units on each floor for 20 units total. So it is really a true mixed-use building in that way. So we got first floor here, second floor showing some of the residential floor plans, third, and then we got a roof plan too. We will talk about some of that rooftop mechanical screening, so we might have to come back to this slide. Here's some of the building elevations. Pretty quickly, just want to dig into some of the key items to point out. The major facade material that they're using is, it's like a slate cladding. We haven't really seen that a ton at all, actually, in the city of Des Moines. The applicants will give us a lot more information about that, but that is what is proposed. If people are familiar, there is a project actually in Valley Junction that just has utilized that slate cladding. So that is the exterior facade material. It's slate, so it's real stone, and it's basically would be proposed to kind of lap on the side of the building. And then also storefront building type, so generally thinking about a lot of ground story transparency, they're hitting a lot of that. I'll keep moving through it here. Also just wanted to show this example as well, just because as staff, one of the items that's on the P&Z docket tonight is talking about some of those horizontal facade divisions, talking about those shadow lines. And generally, we as staff, we understand this is a different context, different site, different orientation, but generally we felt that with the shadow line, with the storefront that was depicted here, that it really created kind of a strong facade division between that ground story and then those upper stories that had a different use, a little bit different programming as well. So we'll get back into that a little bit. Here are some of the perspectives that the applicant provided to show some of the rooftop mechanical screening that's proposed. Generally, the applicant has shown perspectives from both Linden Street as well as High Street to try to show some of the concealment of the units that is proposed with their partial parapet. So I'll dig into that a little bit more when I dig into the staff report. So digging into the staff report here, the crux of the relief, or the main relief that's requested, I'm not going to spend too much time on Part A, but the first design alternative that's requested here is related to primary entryway recessing. And per the storefront building design regulations, the primary entryways are required to be recessed between 3 and 8 feet. The applicant, they haven't proposed that, but they have a couple of different alternative building and site design features that really meet the intent of that requirement. So the mass timber construction that the applicant is going to spend a lot of time on talking about, those exposed columns really draw a lot of attention to the entryway. And then also the building is slightly set back from the right-of-way. There's a green space buffer that's proposed between the public realm and the building that really meet the intent of that recessing for those entries. So as staff, we support that request. The second item I want to dig into is that rooftop mechanical equipment. So I know we've talked a little bit about this on the commission with prior projects, but per code, especially with the new construction, the requirement is that all rooftop units are required to be screened on all sides, either by a parapet or with some type of metal architectural quality screening. And what that means is if you're going to be doing a parapet, the expectation is that the parapet would be at least as tall as all the units on all the sides to completely screen them. What the applicant has proposed is a 3-sided parapet, and the parapet at any level would not match the height of the units. So the applicant has definitely demonstrated that there is definitely some rooftop unit concealment from certain points in the right-of-way, both on Linden Street and then on Ingersoll from different angles. And as staff, we do acknowledge and recognize that. But we also recognize, too, that there's a lot of nuance with a lot of that rooftop mechanical screening, and there's a lot of views, especially with topography, with different points that people could be on adjacent properties, with different views within the right-of-way, and that without screening the units with a complete parapet that at least meets or exceeds the height of all the units, it's really hard to try to ensure that all of the units are going to be completely screened and not visible from public view. So that is the basis of staff's recommendation for that. So as staff, we do not support the Type 2 request to partially waive at least the mechanical unit screening on the roof. And then the last design alternative request that I wanted to hit on, so that relates to those horizontal facade divisions or those shadow lines. So you might have noticed in the staff report this was worded a little bit more flexibly than a lot of our other staff recommendations, and that's because as staff, we dialogued a lot with the applicant, and we understand that the applicant in a lot of ways felt that they were meeting the intent of the requirement. So when we think about a shadow line, and I'll just read it kind of verbatim here, or try to paraphrase basically what the code calls for, just to get everybody thinking on the same plane. But basically what a shadow line is from the perspective of staff is that it's an architectural or a building articulation piece or a feature that either protrudes or is recessed from the facade at least 2 inches, and it creates a shadow. So it is really supposed to delineate floors or building features from each other. And really, and I'll go back to the elevation here. The applicant has argued and has proposed that the storefront system with its recessed system, recessed 2 feet from the edge of the facade as well as the canopy action, has in effect created a shadow line on the facade. as staff, we were looking at that. We were a little bit concerned with that because we didn't feel like it created a strong enough shadow line, a strong enough division between that primary ground story and those upper stories that have different uses programmatically. And so as staff, we didn't really feel that it was meeting the intent of the requirement. We'd also wanted to get some input from the commission to talk about that in a little bit more detail. And then also, we wanted to show this example, again, different context, but we do feel that with this strong ribbon here, with the storefront system that's continued continuously across the facade, that we felt that something like this would more meet the intent of a shadow line or a horizontal facade division that's called out for in our design code. So I know I got a little rambly there. Does anybody have any questions on that piece or just this in general?
Is the code written such that that shadow line requirement is just on the primary frontage?
That's correct, yes. Mhm.
What's the ordinance attempting to achieve by requiring a shadow line? What's the purpose?
Yeah, so it's really, I guess, it's aesthetic as well as maybe more functional and programmatic. So really, it's to create like a strong ground story, and so to try to draw engagement on the street and draw visual interest with that ground story, that storefront. They're going to have those active, more commercial, a little bit heavier uses, and then delineate that with the facade that's kind of long and relatively flat. It's try to give it a little bit more depth as you look up and as you're a pedestrian or a motorist experiencing it from a public way.
And just to add on to that, there's a variety of techniques in the code that try to address articulation within a facade, just to try to break up buildings, break up mass, just to provide visual interest. And so this is just one of the techniques that's in there. And we put it on the agenda so we could just get your guys' input as how you feel about the project. Are we achieving that here? We felt it was kind of an in-between, you know, the amount of the upper floor siding that comes down in between the the glass storefronts really pulls down kind of the mass of the upper floors. So with that, we wanted to, but we also recognize too that sometimes it's good to have somebody else's perspective. So we thought, you know, it'd be good to bring this before you. This is typically something that we handle at the staff level. So you haven't really seen this before, but I think it's a valuable exercise for the commission to be a part of the dialogue on something that seems like maybe more dialogue is needed. So that was our thought process, and that's a little bit of what the standard is trying to achieve.
On the Valley Junction one that you pointed out, you described it as a ribbon. That's neither recessed or protruding, though? That's the same?
To our knowledge, yes. I mean, the applicant might be able to have a little bit more detail about that, but
Okay.
yes. Mhm.
Okay, and that's something that the staff has discussed with the applicant before? Or is that something that the staff would be okay with, even though it doesn't exactly meet the letter of the code?
Yeah, we're supportive of a technique it doesn't have to be recessed from our perspective. We allow flexibility and have done so frequently. But this was just a particular case where we felt like, you know, how strong is that visual separation? So we're not looking to get lost in the weeds on, is it, you know, how many inches, you know, is it actually physically released? It's more about kind of the visual. Does it create that break?
Right.
Is
Right.
what we're looking for.
I just didn't know how closely you were trying to follow the code or not.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
So is this a type 1 design alternative?
It's a type 2 design alternative.
Okay.
Well, for this material or this?
For the horizontal facade divisions, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we're seeking your input on. I mean, this is an administrative, the fact that we're bringing it before you, we didn't formally deny this. We're going to take your input into consideration in our review of it. I think, you know, if the applicant wanted to formally request that, but we thought this was worthy of kind of having a discussion with you and move, you know, seeing how we can move forward.
Were there any other type 1 design alternatives that you guys have already granted that had to do with the articulation of the building?
No, not that I'm aware of, no.
Yeah, I don't know the full package, but I believe there's some, including
Yeah,
ARPA
there's
funds.
$370,000 ARPA funds, and then also the applicant has indicated that they're going to be requesting tax abatement. I don't know the exact schedule yet, but that's a by right. They have to demonstrate certain sustainability elements, but they have indicated that they will go for that.
I have a question about slate. Describe slate more more definitely to me. One thinks of a slate roof with overlapping. One thinks of a gray or a light black or something like that in terms of color. I don't quite picture that on a flat surface elevation. Talk to me about that, please.
Yeah, so you kind of did hit on that a little bit. What the facade material that's proposed is a slate roofing material. So it is like a shingle, basically, that is proposed. So there's the mass timber construction that the applicant will probably talk in more detail about, but they're proposing mass timber panels, and then the slate cladding would basically lap on that. So it'd be about 3/4 of an inch thick, roughly. And it's real slate. It's got a 75 to 100-year warranty, and it's legitimate stone is what is proposed.
Yeah, and we can let the applicant talk a little bit more about insulation and that sort of stuff too, Will.
I have one more question on the door recessing. So, I mean, I'm sorry for not really fully understanding this. So basically, the doors have to be 3 to 8 feet from the surface of the second floor?
Of the first floor, the primary frontage, so on the ground story.
Right, so the ground story has to be
Yeah,
further away
but-
from the street than the
Correct.
windows up above.
Correct, yes.
What are we trying to achieve with that, or what's the intent of that?
The intent of that is, again, to provide a little bit of interest, to try to break up the facade a little bit, and then also from a functionality standpoint, to try to basically reduce pedestrian conflicts, so people kind of going in and out of storefronts with the right-of-way. With the fact that this building is set back a couple of feet from the actual property line, and I'll go back to the site plan here.
So often a storefront building would be set at the property line, right up against the sidewalk. So as people walk down the side, think of it as a tradition, like a storefront, how the door kind of recesses in so you can step in out of the traffic flow of the pedestrian. That's what it's trying to achieve.
So with the placement and then this instance of this green buffer here, we felt like that met the intent of that requirement.
All right, thank you, Nick. And is the applicant present? You have 10 minutes. Please state your name, address, and then you can sign in when you're done.
Scott Cutler, 5709 Walnut Hill Avenue in Des Moines. Good evening. My name's Scott, and with my wife Molly, we run Cutler Development here in town. And we're very happy to be here in front of you tonight and appreciate your consideration and asks of the Commission. We have our architectural team, ID8 Architects, as well as our civil engineer, ERG, and they'll be speaking about the specifics of our request here in a minute, but we want to just give you a first kind of a broad overview of the project. The Starlost building will transform the blighted gas station located at 2701 Ingersoll Avenue into Iowa's first zero-carbon building as certified by the International Living Future Institute. The building will be 3 stories with commercial on the first floor to activate the streetscape, with 20 apartments on levels 2 and 3 to offer additional workforce housing in the area, all while contributing to the aggressive environmental goals set by the City of Des Moines City Council.
So to be certified as carbon neutral, 100% of the building's embodied carbon or carbon footprint during construction, as well as 100% of the building's operational carbon or carbon footprint during occupancy will be reduced and offset. This goal will be accomplished with the use of highly efficient energy systems and also with the use of innovative mass timber that's been mentioned before. In addition to providing carbon sequestration benefits, this mass timber offers a beautiful aesthetic and additional environmental benefits, including durability and sustainability. Our team has been working on this project for the last 18 months, and we're now nearing the finish line. Pending the results of tonight's meeting, we are excited to potentially break ground in as little as 3 weeks. Scott and I live down the street. Oh, I forgot to mention Molly and 5709 Walnut Hill Avenue. We live down the street from the project, and we look forward to playing a hands-on role in both the development of the site as well as the management of the property once the building is filled. So thank you for your time tonight, and at this point, we'll pass the mic to Megan Drake and Russ Bitterman from ID8 Architects.
Hello, I'm Russ Bitterman with ID8 Architects. Our address is 1440 Locust Street, Des Moines. I mainly wanted to address a couple things. The question was about the slate siding. It is a slate shingle. The exposed face of those is 8 inches high, 12 inches wide. The slate are actually 16 inches tall, so there's a full half of the slate in each row that's covered up. It's the exact same slate we're looking at right now and planning to use that was used in West Des Moines on the other project that you saw earlier. So it's pretty simple system. It's just like a slate roof, except we're putting it on a wall. The fasteners will be covered up and not exposed. So then some of the other questions that particularly relate to the questions that we're here to talk about. I don't feel the need to talk about the recessed entries since the staff is on board with that. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer those on an architectural level. I just want to make sure that it's understood that the building is set back 5 feet from the property line, so there is a lot of room out in front that meets the staff's or the zoning intent. I also want to be clear then on the rooftop units. They aren't rooftop units. We're not talking about not screening rooftop units in the traditional thought process of big units. These are condensing units for each apartment. And so, there's something that sits in everybody's backyard. We're putting them up on the roof because the site is so tight. I think that actually helps screen them better than if we had them on the ground. But they're probably, 3 feet tall, 1.5 foot or 2 foot wide, something else deep, maybe 2.5 feet deep. Our parapet from the at the center of the building is about 2 feet high. So the units will be sitting about 2 feet down. That means approximately 1 foot will be up higher than the parapet. That's why we think we're meeting this. All of the units are going to be set back from the front and the back of the building by 25 feet, at least. They're towards the center. That's where our mechanical units are in each unit. So they're on either side of the corridor walls. So that's all I have to say on that. The horizontal, we really do think that we're meeting the intent of showing the front and the back, or the front lower level and the upper floors. We have more glass on the first floor for the retail. It's more open. We've got the wood that's going to be visible from the inside for each of the retail spaces. And all of those, and then the canopies also are going to help with that separation. All of those things delineate the lower level from the upper residential levels, in our opinion. That's all I have to say. Are there any questions? Yeah. They're close because of the way the upper floor are residential type windows with nailing flanges. On the upper floors, because we needed some of that depth, we're bounding that with a material so that there's a depth to that. On the lower level, since we've got the canopy, the storefront system sits out, it's probably an inch back from the face of the building of the slate. I mean, remember, the slate is probably, each layer is 3/8 to 1/2 of an inch. And so when you get 3 layers at each level, that's going to be out inch, inch and a half.
So it's less than 4 inches.
Yeah.
It's pretty thick.
Yeah.
Are the balconies real balconies, or are they?
They're Juliet-type balconies. So they're just there to stop somebody from falling out. It's not a deck.
And the slate goes from the parapet to grade.
Yeah, we have an 8-inch curb at the bottom, a concrete curb that sets the slate up off the ground. Andy?
Hi, Russ.
Hi.
Could you talk a little bit about the slate and why you chose to use it on the project, and I guess kind of the benefits of it, you know?
Well, the long-term durability of it, it's a natural material. The biggest carbon footprint that comes out of it is the harvesting and transportation. I think Molly can probably speak to that better because she's been working on that. But we tried to find some other products, but most of the types of products that have low carbon footprint in the manufacture come from Europe. And so then we just lose all of our carbon efficiencies with transportation. This is, like I said, a product that they used on their project in West Des Moines. The project is just finishing up, but the slate's been up all year, and they've enjoyed the way it looks. They think it's going to perform well for them. It looks natural. I mean, it's got a rough face to it like slate does, so.
As I look at the drawings, I'm struck by the simplicity and the sort of lack of articulation in the plane, you know, in the plane that's facing us. But it occurs to me that that's probably due to the choice of that material. Probably, if you're all in on that slate, you're probably not going to want to break it too often. You'll introduce the opportunity for water infiltration, and you'll sort of lose the advantage of the material. Is that your thinking as well?
Yeah, and again, we looked at trying to use a different material on the lower part. There are some pressed stone materials that are panelized, but again, those come from Europe. And so, the goal of the project is to do something that can achieve that net zero carbon. And so that's been a big decision maker for us. So yeah, finding something else that would withstand some of the lower level is going to take a little bit more abuse, because people are going to be able to touch it. The slate's going to hold up to that. Some of the pressed stone that we looked at could do that also, but again, like I said, we would be harming ourselves with our carbon approach.
Would brick or other materials that we commonly see, would those offset? Those are not as carbon neutral. Those are not carbon neutral, right? Is that why you wouldn't propose brick on that first floor?
Yeah, again, I think Molly could explain that a lot better than I can. She's been the one that's been looking at a lot of this with us. So. But yeah, I think that's true.
Excuse me. I think I'm better now. I have a question about the canopies. Are they fixed, and and then what is the material that they're going to be?
They're just metal covered canopies. They're not very thick.
I'm wondering if we can, the city presented another example of a similar situation. Could we call that up on the screen, please? Yeah, thank you. Here in this instance, the design does make a really quite visual distinction between the first floor and the upper floors, both in terms of space, in terms of depth, and in terms of color. And when I look at the building as proposed here, the notion of the horizontal look of that stretch along Ingersoll is of a one-story situation. And this is a much higher building. What I'm wondering is to play into the environment that actually has this horizontal look to it. What else could be done on the first floor to break up the image more of a blocky substance or a space or a mass that would tie in more with the horizontal look of the rest of the block?
Well, there's a couple things on this building that are different than what we've got. The windows that are shown there are curtain wall. They're tall enough that, I think that's correct, am I right? Yeah. So we have our windows 10 foot high, so they're pretty tall, but that's as tall as you can go with just regular storefront. So that was the first thing. The other thing is that the floor to floor on this, I think, was 13 feet. Our building is 15 feet floor to floor. We wanted to provide more space on the interior for the retail, so our building is actually taller than this. And then the third thing is this building is on a narrow frontage, and so it looks taller, and then the bottom floor is all glass, and then they've got a corner entry on that one and exposed the wood, so it does all of those things. We're trying to show the wood. You can see the wood through the glass in the photo. That's what ours is going to look like. The wood is in the middle of each one of those openings on the first floor. So we don't have our wood posts where the slate is. You can kind of see that there. It shows through.
Are the commercial windows inset, or are they flush with the rest of the elevation?
They're fairly flush. They sit back a little bit. But that's why we put a canopy over the top, a small canopy, was to give it that depth.
Yeah, thank you.
A couple questions. So it sounded like you were describing that you're like within a foot of the parapet screening the mechanical units.
Yeah.
Why not just extend it to meet?
Yeah, where the
request?
units are, they're in the middle of the building, and so.
I understand your explanation, but why not just extend it to match the code?
We could extend it 8 inches up without having structural issues. And we did look at that, and we've talked about it. So we could make the parapet 8 inches taller. Otherwise, we'd have to have additional structure up there to support the parapet extending up.
Similar if the canopies are trying to do the work of the horizontal or the base definition of the building.
Mm-hmm.
Is really what we're talking about with the horizontal definition. Why not push that datum up within 3 feet of the floor line so you're hitting that intent too?
I thought that the intent was 3 feet of the upper floor line, the second floor line. Isn't that the intent?
Yeah, wouldn't that put you at 12.4 or something?
I think the general intent of it is just to provide that separation. I mean,
Yeah.
we can read the specific code language, but.
So you're saying.
I guess what I'm asking is why not meet these generally okay code requirements, like putting a horizontal within the distance of the floor line that's requested and height of the parapet to screen the mechanical, and even just recess the doors. I mean, it's not impossible per your scheme.
Well, when we recess the doors, then we're taking space out of commercial tenant space.
But wouldn't that be required of every commercial space in a storefront zoning?
Well, that's why we set it back, though. We set it back so that we wouldn't have to do that. I mean, everything that we're talking about, so raising the canopy up means that we either have to have a beam across there and separate the glass so that it's supported, since it's curtain wall, or storefront, or we'd have to do curtain wall glass. And so we thought providing those parapets across, or the canopies across there gave that horizontal line. I mean, it's not continuous, but it's 80% of that front.
Did you have something?
Yeah, I've got a slight shift since I apologize. I don't know much about horizontal lines, but I'm curious about how do you intend to offset the operational carbon? I mean, is this with, are you buying RECs, or what is the actual operational offset, or is there enough of a sink in it? Okay.
Great question. Thanks for bringing that up. So the intent will be, so the regulation requires us to drop the overall energy consumption of the building by 20% versus a standard building at code, first of all. And then we have to go ahead and offset the remaining energy usage, operational energy usage. And to your point, we will be doing a combination of small solar on the rooftop, but we also are investing in off-site solar projects and are partnering with those groups to retire the RECs on behalf of the project. So that electricity will still be able to be used, generated will still be able to be used, but the kind of the credits will be associated with this project. It's one thing that we're considering. We would like to incorporate some sort of the offset on-site versus just doing it all off-site, but we kind of haven't finalized that piece yet. That would be, yeah. Put them at 45 degree. Yeah, that's.
I think that that's a brilliant idea. I mean, why not do that? I don't know that, like, is the city going to try to make you screen the solar panels?
No.
So you could use this PV array as a screen, and then you don't have to move your parapet, and then you don't have to goof around with your condensers. You just have to, like, show it and do it. Then we can just fight about the horizontal line.
I think that's a great idea. We'll definitely look into it. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of this item? Please come up. You have 5 minutes. State your name, address, and then sign it when you're finished.
Hello, my name is Kirsten Plowman. I am at 821 30th Street, so just around the corner and up the hill from this area. I spend a lot of time on Ingersoll, and so I'm excited to see a redevelopment happening there. In all honesty, I am also the treasurer of the Woodland Heights organization. Unfortunately, I cannot speak for that organization at this time because we did not take a formal vote, which is what we do in our organization. So I will say on behalf of the organization, we were extremely happy to have the Cutlers come and present to us and take a number of our ideas into account. So we really appreciate that interaction, and we believe that they are and will continue to be good neighbors to us, both residential and commercial. For myself personally, I am extremely excited to be near or be in any way involved with what is possibly the first carbon net zero building in the state. As a conservationist and a sustainability advocate, that is something that I'm extremely excited for. As it comes to the waivers being sought, my belief is that items A and C should be waived. I think A is a little bit of a moot point. Would you go to slide 58 or page 58? It is the perspectives? It's one of the perspectives. Keep going. Oh, it's not in here then. There was a perspective in one of the packets, and I apologize that it's not, well, I can't apologize, I didn't put this together, that shows a better view of what these canopies look like from an angle, of the way they come out. When you're walking down the sidewalk, there is definitely an understanding that that provides a pretty strong cross. So I personally believe it would be a very nice way to show that this is commercial on the bottom. It's also good to understand that the major building just to the east of this is extremely one-dimensional. So having it set back even from that building's face will go a long way to show that this is a different building and that it is, a commercial use. Everything there is. I can't 100% say there's no entrances to residential use on this block, but I'm pretty darn sure that's the case. All of the residential entrances in this area are on the back. As it comes to item B, I would agree with staff recommendation that some sort of screening, I don't necessarily believe it has to be a parapet, would be appreciated. The way Ingersoll sits, it runs basically east-west, and it sits in a valley. So those residents who are on Linden and High, that are the streets that go north, they sit up quite a bit. And these are, 1910s, 20s homes that are 2-3 stories high. So as you're looking out your front window or as you're looking out your bedroom window on High Street, normally at this point they can see actually right over to Grand, which then also sits up higher. And so I believe that as a courtesy to those residents, it would be excellent to provide some screening to this mechanical, and I'm 100% in favor of solar panels. I would rather look at a solar panel than a condenser unit. Again, generally in favor and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of this item? Anyone against this item or neutral? All right. And you do have 5 minutes for rebuttal if you have anything else to add to that. Oh.
Just wait. I think we realized that we did get some emails that we didn't scroll through.
Got some emails today.
We can go ahead and,
Oh.
if you wanted to do rebuttal, and then we
Yeah,
can show those, we can do that.
Yeah.
Nick will just put it up on the screen, but if you want to go ahead and do rebuttal.
Yeah, do you have anything to add for rebuttal? You do have 5 minutes if you want to address anything.
Oh, okay. I'm just going to do it from over. That's fine.
Hey, Nick, can you go to that very first email? I was just trying to read the last 2 sentences. Okay, thank you.
All right. Do you have anything to add?
Russ Bitterman again with ID8 Architects. I guess in looking at the elevation and talking about that band, we'd like to propose that we could add canopies on the corners that would extend and go around the corner to complete that all the way across the front facade. If that would help, that would be over the window area, but it's just a suggestion. We want to make sure that we know what we're leaving here with, and as they said, they want to start working on the site as soon as possible. So any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. All right, if there's no one else, I will. Oh, you're good. I will close the public hearing and ask the commissioners their thoughts. I have a thought. I am generally supportive of approval of A and some type of C with his amendment. And I think almost all the emails we just saw were in favor of that as well, and the neighbor who showed up tonight. It seems like almost no one is of the neighbors are supportive of denial of waiving requirement B, and since that affects them a lot, I'm in favor of what the city has proposed there.
I didn't quite understand what you said, quite frankly. If you could repeat what you said.
So I'm in favor basically of what staff has recommended here, other than C has an amendment proposed from the gentleman who spoke, that they could add some horizontal canopies. Thank you, Abby. Canopies at the corner, which I think is a good compromise. But I'm open to others' views there.
No, I'm in agreement with what you said in terms of the design alteration to strengthen the horizontal line. I also think that, as one of the neighbors mentioned, that it's important to have these units on the top screened because of the particular topography where this sits, and neighbors up farther to the north, it's an aesthetic feature. And particularly because, Ingersoll Avenue has just blossomed as a showpiece corridor. And I think this building is going to add to it. But I think here again that the screening is important within that context.
I agree with the screening. Nick, if the canopies are the horizontal element, where would code require them to be in height in relation to the second floor?
Sorry.
So where would code require so the horizontal element is not necessarily describing a canopy in the code. It's talking about an architectural articulation, a shadow line. And it requires it to be at a height within relation to the second floor to try to establish that base.
Right.
This building does look a little squat in its storefront proportionally.
Sure.
I think of benefit from responding to that code section. So I guess my proposed addition would be that we also say that should be raised up to within that dimension that meets that code shadow.
Within 3 feet of the top of the ground story, that's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Are we sure that actually putting, perforations into the slate at that point isn't going to compromise the envelope? I mean, I guess I got 2 questions on this, and apologies, because if what we're saying is we're looking for something that actually visually delineates, what do we mean by that? If I'm looking at West Des Moines, I've got basically a string of metal that's sitting up there, delineates. Sure. If I put a black line, is that a delineation? Like if I just paint a line across there, am I good?
We're saying that this canopy can suffice for it, which is, I don't know how far it sticks off the building, but looks like a foot, 18 inches, something like that.
But I thought you were just saying the canopy suffices if we move it 2 feet up from where it is, because it's certainly 10.
That would address the proportion that's being required in the code in a stronger way.
Apologies. So we're saying we take the canopies out, we move them up 2 feet, and put them into the wall 2 feet up. Isn't that what we're saying? Because it's 15 feet to 10. I need to move them up 2 to get them within 3, so I'm basically up.
I mean, they'll have to detail the building. They're not going to, physically attach it through. It's actually like a framed out piece with some metal cladding over it. Water's going to drip off of it. It's all part of the envelope. I mean, I think what would look best is if the glass extends and just goes up to 12 foot of storefront, which I believe we've done without going to curtain wall, but that's not really the role of the commission here to talk about.
I guess I'm just not seeing the advantage of changing the envelope significantly for 2 feet when, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just looks visually like a ground floor is fundamentally different from the above, so that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Because we're essentially like not meeting the requirement of code just for a cost reason. Like they don't want to move up the windows because those windows will cost more. I think we should address the code because I think it'll result in a stronger building or a stronger public realm.
I guess that's my question, was the purpose of the code. What is the purpose of the code? Is the purpose of the code to make sure that we know that the bottom floor is different from the top floors? Seems like we've done that. If what we're saying now is what is it that we're needing to actually, how clear does a line have to be?
I guess I'm just not on board with the arguments that have been made about why relief should be granted. Like, we're going to give up recessed doorways because that gives up retail square footage. I mean, that would be true of absolutely every building in the town, in the city. And then the same thing is true about this. If we're saying that this is our horizontal datum for the base of the building and we're not going to require it to go up because the glass is more expensive, it's just a cost thing.
Did you have something, Nick?
No.
Oh,
Here to answer questions. Sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you.
And flip if we need to move to.
I guess the counter argument
It's like
could be
lower the parapet thing too, or the screen the mechanical because it's more expensive. I mean, it's.
Oh, well, now if you're
Let's
trying to
meet
get a
these
rise,
things,
if you're trying to get a rise on that, I agree, fully screen the parapet. Fine with that. Not opposed to that at all, because again, I think the look angles as they have them here are deceptive relative to what the surrounding is. But on this one, we're saying we're going to make major alterations that have significant cost impacts or compromise the actual envelope to actually raise it 2 feet. That doesn't make any sense to me. The code may not be the best code here, which is like some of the argument. Why is that artificial 3 feet relevant? How are we benefiting this as a whole because that 3 feet?
Yeah, I think Abby is.
I just want, if I can remember what I was going to say, I think I asked Jason earlier about how much they're trying to get to the letter of the code precisely because of this. How closely do they need to bring it to the code? And he responded that it was more of the intent of it. So I'm not sure if, how far up it is. I guess I'd like to hear from staff how rigid that they want to be on that. I guess extending the canopies to the corners to me is would definitely make me more likely to accept that. Making the windows higher, I think there could also be, I don't know for sure, but an energy component to that because glass is very inefficient. And since they're trying to be carbon neutral, that might also be in play here.
Are you asking a question? You kept talking, so
Sorry, because I was trying to make a couple points, but yeah, I guess I'm wondering since you noted earlier that.
Right. What I'm trying to convey is that on the staff level, we're always, when we review projects, we're always thinking about what is the intent that we're trying to achieve. We're always open to finding other ways to achieve intent. And I think the two things that have kind of come out of this discussion really is there's just the notion of creating that kind of visual separation between the first floor and the upper floors to break the building, break the facade up. There's also the kind of putting that shadow line up higher, emphasizing the ground to floor height of, or excuse me, that is making sense, but ground to ceiling height of the first floor, kind of creating a more traditional storefront that has a dominant presence to it as far as, glass and interaction with the street. That's also a part of why that's, I think, tied to the trying to get within 3 feet of the ceiling. But at the end of the day, we're always open to looking at multiple ways to do it. We're looking for your input. I really appreciate all the conversation, because we have these kinds of conversations in-house too. So I'm glad it's not just, us that are, nerdy. But
This is a tricky building to think about in some ways, because they've sort of set up an argument. They set up a bargain, right? So the net zero piece of it is laudable, and it's something that I wish that we could do with all buildings. And it feels like it's a good argument for concessions. And some of the concessions that they're asking for are design problems that I've struggled with and felt frustrated by, and kind of wondered at sort of their arbitrariness. But it's difficult. I agree with Dan that the reason for not raising the parapet or raising the glass is really a financial argument that every single project that comes in here wanting to not screen a rooftop unit can make. And so I think we need to be cognizant of that and look for a solution rather than just granting relief on that. And the other thing I'll say is that I bet that the slate material is an expensive material. And I think that the Valley Junction project looks nice because of that material. But I also think that the project lacks articulation, and I think that is meaningful in an urbanist point of view. I think that it'll matter to people walking by and driving by and looking at it from around the neighborhood. I think the lack of articulation of the building makes it feel bigger and more out of scale than it would if it were more thoughtfully articulated. And so it feels like we're just saying, well, if you can just sort of do a little bit more canopy, we'll call it good. And I don't think that that's quite right, but we're trying to work within the constraints of the zoning ordinance, which is sort of a crude and blunt instrument too. So that's where I'm at on it. None of that was real concrete, but that's sort of my thinking.
I think you said something very interesting where, as a city, we would like to see carbon neutral buildings. And I think personally, I'm willing to make concessions with A and C. I think B is we should require. I think the resident took it perfectly out of my mouth before I was able to speak about it, but there's that elevation homeowners on that north side can see from that end. But if we want a city that's neutral, I think this is how we push it, and I'm willing to give some ground on this. So, and then set the message to other developers and engineers of, you want to see some things done, do the right thing and go neutral. So.
Just to qualify though, like carbon neutral basically means we're going to be buying offset contracts forward looking on this. And I don't know if we even have the ability to actually require carbon neutrality going forward. Because we're basically saying, okay, they're going to pay every year to buy a certain number of RECs that counter the actual energy being used. Not opposed to that in slightest. I mean, we're actually in that business, so it's not anything that I'm saying I'm fundamentally opposed to it. But I don't think we can actually require the purchase of RECs going forward over a period of time, unless I'm confused, because we have other restrictions on other ones. So I don't think that saying, yep, we got an intent to actually have a REC requirement now should excuse a change in what we're doing now as a result of these materials, which I think I also agree are very expensive materials.
Madam Chair, could I try something in terms of a motion?
Absolutely, please do.
I would move that we allow the waiver of A, that we require the screening, the mechanical equipment on all sides, and then in terms of C, we accept the design solution that has been proposed by the applicant to extend canopies over on the corners of the front facade, as discussed here in the meeting.
Thank you, Will. All in favor of Will's motion, please raise your right hand. All opposed, please raise your right hand.
Motion carries.
All right, thanks, everyone. That was a good discussion on kind of a novel topic, and I'm excited to see your building, so thanks. We'll move on to the last item of the night, and it's a request from Colbert Properties, represented by Rob Beeman, for review and approval, public hearing site plan, CSLA lighting for property at 2679 Maury Street, and for type 2 design alternatives A through E. And Nick Tarpey will continue to present.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Nick Tarpey, planning staff. So this is a little bit different context than what we were just talking about, so we're going to have to rewire a little bit. So this site is over on Maury, east side of the city. This is kind of an unusual one, so a lot of the relief that's going to be brought in front of the commission tonight is really related to, it's a really specific provision in the city code, chapter 135, article 10, deals with pre-existing situations. So there's an existing building here, they're proposing a building addition. Based on the square footage and the value of the building that's proposed, the entire building basically has to come into compliance with Chapter 135, the Planning and Design Ordinance. So that's why some of the relief that's being sought tonight is related to that. And so we're going to talk about that. I'll try to dive into that and try to explain that a little bit more. So if anybody's confused about that, feel free to stop me. I can explain it in a little bit more detail. And also, just looking at these design alternatives here, A and C, they really relate to building siting. They all kind of run together. And then D and E stand a little bit on their own. And then we're going to be talking about rooftop units again, too. So here's the context of the site. Again, a corner of Southeast 26th and Maury Street. MLK Boulevard, the extension, is about 800 feet to the north here. WRA facility is about a half mile to a mile south. Vandalia Road is about another half mile to a mile to the east. So if you can kind of picture that a little bit in your head. Really interesting mix of uses and contexts in this area. There's a lot of single-family homes, a lot of undeveloped parcels, some institutional type uses, so really kind of a hodgepodge, I guess, in terms of a neighborhood context here. Here's some photos. They're not super current. They're from last year, Google Street View, just to show you this is the existing building, and I'll show a site plan, too, that'll show the building addition, so you'll see how those two things interplay. This is on Maury Street, looking towards the east. This is Southeast 26th, and then the other cross street that hems the site in, Southeast 27th Court, is where my cursor is. And then this is on Southeast 26th. This is looking towards the north, existing building here, up towards the intersection of Southeast 26th and Maury Street. So here's the existing conditions. It's basically just a plan view of what you just looked at in a photo. So we got a parking lot here, a couple driveways, existing building. It's about 5,000 square feet, large front lawn here. And then here's what's proposed. So we have the existing building outline with my cursor here. Here's the building addition, about 3,000 or so square feet. Trimming out one of the driveways, adding some sidewalks, some landscaping, doing some site improvements. Here's the elevations of the building. And then here's a floor plan that kind of shows the interior layout of the building of what's proposed. So we've got office space here that's really proposed for the addition. The existing portion of the building would be a warehouse or a storage type space. The tenant, and I'll let the applicant describe it in a little bit more detail, but the tenant is a lighting contractor, so they do sales, they ship out lights, light fixtures, things like that. So it'd be an office and like a light kind of warehouse use. And then here's the roof plan. So as you can see, we can delineate between the existing building here, and then here's the new building. We got some rooftop mechanical units here. The applicant did provide some perspective views, kind of similar to the last presentation that we saw, so I'll walk through that a little bit here, just showing from different points from the property, corners on the right-of-way. And I can let the applicant maybe talk about this in a little bit more detail, but just wanted to show you guys for reference. So digging into the staff report here, again, a lot of the relief being requested is related to that Article 10 pre-existing situations. So when we're looking at this site plan, the building siting, so basically there's requirements to meet certain build-to zones, as you guys are probably pretty familiar with Chapter 135, with a lot of the building types. And as you can see, the building is set back over 100 feet from Maury Street, from that primary frontage, and about 40 feet back from Southeast 26th. The applicant is proposing an addition that's going to improve both of those conditions, but still, there's really not a way with a huge site like that for them to legitimately expect to meet those build-to zones and those frontages on both of the frontages, as well as meeting the primary frontage coverage. So with that, A, B, and C, like I said before, they all run together, and so staff, we're generally supportive of that request. Part D is interesting, talking about entryways. So as proposed, the applicant is really proposing to orient their main entrance to the east, to the parking lot. It's kind of how the site operates today. They're really trying to continue that addition, that condition, and the addition is also going to continue that. So there's a main entrance, and we'll go back to the elevations, we can look at it, that's oriented towards the parking lot. The addition does have some glazing and does have some elements that denote it as a front facade, but it doesn't have a principal entrance, and that is something that is required per code. As staff, I think I just talked about it a little bit, we understand the context. The building is set pretty far back from the street. It's an area that it isn't as urban maybe as the last one that we looked at, and so we understand we're not going to be fostering a ton of pedestrian connections here. I think we understand that. But at the same time, we still would like to see some elements added to the front of that building that treat it more like a front. So whether that is an actual principal entrance, whether it's a canopy, whether it's increasing the glazing, different types of facade elements, we would like to see that added as part of this project. And then part E, digging into the rooftop mechanical equipment again, very similar to the last conversation that we had. So there are rooftop units that are proposed. The applicant, they don't know the exact height yet. They are proposing a parapet of about 3 feet, a little bit over 3 feet, to about 3.5 feet or so. And that would be on the building addition. It would partially screen the units. As I just mentioned, the applicant has provided line of sight studies, some perspective studies that have shown from various points there is some concealment of the units. But I think as we just talked about with the last presentation, there's not really a way to fully guarantee, to fully conceal units from all perspectives, all directions. A line of sight study it does not accomplish that. And as staff, we feel with new construction that there should be a parapet that would be at least as tall or taller than the units to fully ensure the enclosure, the screening of the units. So with that, digging into the staff recommendation, as staff, like I mentioned before, items A through E related to the building siting, we do recommend approval of that. Item D is kind of like a conditional approval, basically, and we can talk about this and have a little bit more of a dialogue about it, but basically we understand that it may not be feasible necessarily to provide a principal entrance per code, but as Jason talked about in the last item, if we can try to meet that intent. So whether there's a canopy added, increased glazing, items like that, that would be appropriate, we think, for this context. And then staff is recommending denial of item E to partially waive that screening of the rooftop units. Here's our notification area. Did receive a few calls, no emails about this. Residents were just generally kind of interested in the project, wanted to hear more about it. So not a ton of engagement, though. I can take any questions.
If this came in as like 825 Southeast 26 versus whatever Murray Street, how different would your assessment have been? I mean, how many things would it not have hit if it had come in with its claiming its principal interest was on the west side?
So that's a good question. The mailing address doesn't really take into account the actual primary frontage. So as staff, well,
so if the primary frontage was on Southwest 26 or Southeast 26th Street, that's what I mean. Yep. So if the primary frontage is to the west, would this comply with what you're talking about or not?
I think, Nick, are you saying, what I understand as staff, when a project comes in with multiple frontages, we make a determination as to which frontage is the primary.
Correct. Yeah.
So in this case, we noted the street to the north is the primary, so that's what we've based all the relief on. We haven't done any analysis to know if we would have decided the side street is the front, what relief they would need. I don't know that we can answer.
I can also dig into it too. There are certain provisions in the code that describe primary streets. So I'm not 100% sure, I can double check, but there are certain street frontages that are called mapped primary streets. And so we actually have a city map that literally shows all of the primary streets. So if there is a building that has frontage on one of those streets, it has to be a primary street, no questions asked. If there are no mapped primary streets, as staff, when we get a project in, we have to designate a certain primary street and we can make that evaluation. And there's basically a list of criteria that it's kind of like a cascading list. So you go down, if you're on a mapped primary street, if there's no primary frontages, here's how you would determine it. So there is kind of like an algorithm basically that allows us to determine that when we get a project in.
I think that's a really good question that I'd be interested in knowing how you guys reach that decision, because it looks like the building, since it's an existing building, it looks as if it were designed to orient itself to that side street, right? Which one is that?
Do you want to go back to the pictures?
Is the west elevation of that building supposed to be the front?
So this
Yeah,
one
the
here?
loading docks, or overhead doors?
So that's not the front either?
No. The north would be the front. Well, the east is what the applicant is kind of considering the front. It's facing towards the parking lot. The north here is the one that's facing Maury.
Right, but I think he's saying they've used the east as how they've operationally used the building, but the west is close to the Southeast 26th Street, and appears, one could argue, that's also, could be the primary street, which it looks like mathematically solves our problems. And the primary street map that I've found doesn't appear to indicate that Maury is one of those primary streets. So it doesn't look like we're required to make Maury a primary street. If we're not, we can make our primary street Southeast 26th, and then it seems like most of this goes away.
I don't think that most of this goes away. I mean, at the end of the day, the stuff that has to do with the building positioning, we're recommending approval of. However you want to slice and dice, which is the primary street. They're adding on to the east, and we're supporting them doing that and whatever relief they need. The question at hand is, do we want to offer a waiver of having a front door? There's no front door on the east either, so that's either direction, either street, we're doing that relief, and either street, we need to consider the mechanical equipment.
I guess that's the question, is do you get more bang for your buck if you dress up the one that's closer to 26 than the one that's closer to Maury, is maybe what I'm asking.
Sure, I think because they have overhead doors and that side functions more as a back, how they operate, that's, pushed us more towards thinking along with the addressing and where their actual front door is closer to Maury. But at the end of the day, we're not arguing with them about the placement of the building, that sort of stuff. But, and what we're asking for in exchange for the relief of the is a little more of a front facade flavor to the north side of the addition. We're not necessarily asking for them to do anything to the current building.
So again, north facing Maury, west Southeast 27th, east parking lot, south side interior lot.
So as you look at the west elevation, Nick, the darker brown, that's the existing
Correct,
building.
yes, thank you for explaining that, yes. So this is the new, the gray is the new, the darker is the existing. On which one? Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks.
Are we, this may not be a question that you know the answer to, but do you know why that wood screen is over part of the
Here?
existing building? No, to the right?
So this would be a fencing element. So we can go back to the site plan. They are proposing like a patio type element
Oh,
here. So
okay.
that's this.
Got it.
Yep.
I think it would look more like a front facade if it didn't have scuppers and downspouts. I think that'd be an improvement and make it feel less like, a more considered front facade. Can we see the floor plan too, just to
Yeah.
understand what the program is behind there?
Yeah. So again, open office here. Really, and the applicant can maybe dive in a little bit more. In my opinion, the new addition is really going to be an office space, and they're really going to use the existing as more warehouse storage. That's really kind of how this breaks down.
So since that's open office, on the north end, it seems like they could have more glazing as well. might even be nicer for the people that work there.
Could you repeat that? I think that,
Oh, I was just commenting that since that's all open office, immediately behind the north facade, it seems like they could add, I mean, they could have 2 more windows of the same size potentially.
Yeah, and that was something that we kind of referenced in the staff report. It was pretty flexible, so whether that's a canopy, additional glazing, things like that, something to at least, like as Jason said, make it more of a front.
All the above.
Right.
all right. Did you have something?
Yeah, can we go back and look at the west elevation as
Yep.
well, though? Because I think there is actually, if you look at the floor plan, existing door over there, it looks like it's both operable and still there. It's the black one on the left, right? I guess I don't exactly know what the one to the right is. It didn't look like it was on the floor, but I mean,
Yeah.
it is an overhead door on the plan, because in real life, it isn't anything. So those will be overhead doors there on that side?
Correct.
Okay.
The applicant can speak to their layout.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Nick. And the applicant, I assume that's you. State your name, address, 10 minutes, and sign in when you're done.
Good evening. My name's Josh Ridgely. I'm an architect with Downing Studio. Address is 7632 Northwest 86th Street in Johnston. So where do you guys want to start? I think you had a question about some interior programming, so I figure I can address that. Who drives this? Do I drive this? Okay. Let's go to the floor plan. Yeah. So Leah, you had asked a question about on the north side of the open office, why we couldn't add more glazing. So based on the furniture layout, which isn't in here, we actually have, it's purposeful to not have glazing there because we do have interior office furniture that would sort of be pocketed there. So we do actually have glazing for the staff, and that glazing is rectified with the interior office furniture layout. So the other thing you have to understand about the building too is sort of maximizing wall space where we can, because this is a lighting agency, and so they're essentially utilizing certain wall surfaces so that they can demonstrate the effectiveness of different lighting products that they sell. So let's go to the exterior. So I guess my question is, and Andrew, I kind of appreciated your comment with the last applicant, you know, that sometimes city code becomes this blunt instrument that doesn't really allow for some of the nuance of, you know, kind of like a site-specific architectural solution. And so, you know, what we've done here, we've had a lot of, or I've heard a lot of comments about the north facade and the west facade. You know, Nick addressed it earlier that this building really is, it's kind of a vehicular access building. You know, most of the people that are going to be coming to this building are going to be coming to it by vehicle. And so we felt that the appropriate thing to do was to actually orient the front face of the building, not towards the street, but to where people are actually going to be exiting in their cars and then walking up to the building. You know, that's kind of a notion of architecture, is that the building sort of presents itself and then it creates its own natural wayfinding by just the architectural elements that you have on the building. So we feel that we've kind of met the threshold, or sort of the intent of the code, which is to provide the architectural solution. You know, we've got the canopy on the east facade. You know, when Nick and I were sort of talking about this, I had to respectfully disagree about adding sort of more canopy type elements on the north facade, because in my opinion that would create confusion as to where the actual main entrance to the building was. So again, I think that me and my team have done a good job of sort of addressing the site-specific nature of the building in the context of where it is. You know, we talk about the north facade and so some of the architectural elements. Leah, you had talked about, you know, can we take the scuppers off the north facade? This alternative solution to that is to put them on the east facade, which we're considering kind of the front face of the building. So it was actually intentional to put the roof scuppers in a way that again sort of addressed and cleaned up what we're calling front face of the building. We actually did look at an option that would put all of the water from the existing roof on the new, or on the, from the new roof to the existing. And just based on the roof drain size and what was existing condition, we couldn't do that. Would you like me to address?
I may not be reading the picture right, so I'm sorry, but so on the west elevation, what is the black square on the far right? Is that an overhead door?
Correct. That's an overhead door.
Okay.
The one to the left of it is a double door.
Okay.
So the overhead door goes to a storage area where he can bring in products. Basically, he can like back up a truck and bring in products. The double door is kind of a similar use, but it's a walk-in type door.
Okay.
Correct. Yes. Serve both buildings. It already is. Yep. Yep. Yeah, so on the west facade, there were some existing ground-mounted units, and again, you know, just in an attempt to sort of clean up the property, we've removed those, we've cleaned up the landscaping, and we've moved the mechanical condenser units to the roof. I'm sure nobody's curious about the rooftop mechanical units. That was a joke. Well, they are new. Correct. Sure. And I appreciate the honesty. Yeah. No, it's a wood frame building with a cementitious stucco. So can I address the screening of the rooftop units? I guess that's why I'm here, to do that. Respectfully, I obviously disagree with the intent of the code. And here's why. I'm not really sure why our client has to take on the burden of screening the views from views that they don't control. So in this area, it's a fairly level neighborhood, meaning there's not much grade change. So consider an instance where you have a neighboring property, you get off of the right, or you get beyond the property right away, and then you get to an elevation that could actually be above the parapet, right? So I know I'm speaking in hypotheticals, but here I think that we've met the intent of the code by screening the units with the parapets. It is correct that we have not raised the parapets to match the height of the units, but I look at that and I say, haven't we met the intent of the code?
It isn't that you can only do that by raising the parapets. You can also put screening up, can't you? Or am I misunderstanding? So what's the cost of this project?
Cost of the
What's the
project?
cost of the project? What's the total project cost?
Approximately $1.3 million.
And then so actually screening of those screening of the mechanical, not by raising the parapets, but just screening it, what does that cost?
That with the structural modifications you'd make to the roof, plus the roof detailing, is approximately a $20,000 ad.
So 20,000 out of 1.3 million for meeting ordinance?
I do understand sort of where you're getting at, just respectfully disagree with it.
But the math we're good on.
Yes. Yeah, the numbers I've given you are close enough for discussion. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And I guess what you're sort of leading into is relative to the project cost, the cost of additional screening is relatively minor, correct?
I think I'm saving you more money by moving it to Southeast 26th Street entrance, so it's hard to say.
All right, are there any further questions? All right, thank you. And I don't think there's anyone in the audience that's going to speak. So we have no audience. I'll close the public hearing. And commissioners, what do you think?
This is
The primary-
Dory. Oh, I would move staff.
I'm in agreement with that. Chris, did you need to add anything?
I just think the primary entrance item is something that we should probably consider more closely and figure out how we're making those changes. For example, we had a project on Southeast 9th a while ago where by redefining primary entrance, we caused significant cost to an applicant in that case that probably couldn't afford it. I think it is an important, our logic of why our primary entrance is where and our ability to be more flexible in that definition. Maybe in this case, no one cares, but in other cases, it's one that actually has been significant in the past, has not been clear on why we are choosing what we're choosing, and should be something that we really take seriously.
Thank you, Chris. I think staff can note that. Dory has moved staff. All in favor, please raise your right hand.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And we do have a few items at the end here. I know we have to start a subcommittee for the next line of leadership.
Yep,
And nominating committee. And so if you'd like to be on that, please let me know. I have been on it for the last 3 years, and I would like to do it one more time, and then I'm going to be done with it forever. So I would like to be on it this time, though, if anyone else. It's a committee to nominate the next line of leadership, so the chair, vice chair, vice chair.
So we'll have those elections at the meeting in January. We hold them at the end of the meeting, and then the new leadership takes over at the following meeting.
Chris
I'll volunteer again.
and Leah? Chris and Leah and me, is that good? Okay. So I'll just email you both, and then we'll chat. So, all right. Anything else, Jason?
Oh, yeah, I do. Thank you. We will have a 5:30 session at the next meeting. We're going to give you an update on the historic preservation plan that we're a third to pushing halfway through. Hopefully, a lot of you have tracked it over time. We've invited you to some initial meetings. So if you can make it, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.